両高崎、さらわれた妹を探すため危険な町サウスタウンに乗り込む。コバート・ガルシア、両の親友、そしてライブ、両と共にサウスタウン。サウスタウンで彼らを待ち受ける者だ。
And I'm back with another retro active review of a classic fighting game. And this time I'm talking about another game from the SNK franchise, the prequel to Fatal Fury, The Art of Fighting, which was released in 1992, a whole year after Fatal Fury. Like in my last video, I'm going to give a brief history on what else was going on in 1992 before talking about the game. And so just give one more shout out to my boy Sam, who gave me the idea for this. Thanks for the idea, mate. So it all started in 1992. I was 6 years old, and a few things happened that year, quite big things. There was an Olympics in Spain where the USA Dream Team wreck-shopped and brought home the gold, and Michael Jordan was in that team, so there you go. Gladiators premiered on UK TV, one of the greatest shows back then. You know, I used to watch that every Saturday at 6 o'clock with my parents and my gran, pretty good times, and my cousins. And a few good films came out that year as well, like Under Siege, aka Die Hard on a Train, The Mighty Ducks, Death Becomes Her, The Candyman, Passenger 57, and Batman Returns. And a few banger songs came out that year as well, like the classic Rhythm is a Dancer by Snap, Out of Space by one of my favorite bands of all time, The Prodigy, the one-hit classic Jump by Criss Cross, Tetris by Dr. Spin, and a weird Super Mario Land song by a dude who's, I cannot remember his name right now, but it was a good song. I had it on vinyl. Games that came out that year were Super Mario Kart, Batman Returns, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 featuring Tails, the real Final Fantasy V, long story, and the infamous Night Trap, the game that got banned. And also, the game we'll be talking about in this video, The Art of Fighting. History. After the release of Street Fighter 1, Hiroshi Matsumoto left Capcom in 1988 to join Takashi Mashijima at SNK to create a new fighting game, which ended up being Fatal Fury, which was a huge success. So SNK wanted to capitalize on that and keep this hype train going, so they decided not to do a sequel right away, but rather a spin-off with slightly different gameplay, which resulted in the creation of Art of Fighting. Just like in Fatal Fury, they decided to take a lot of influence from action movies from the late 80s and early 90s, and decided to make it more story focused, unlike its rivals Street Fighter. He also decided he wanted to use new protagonists for this game, so he decided to create two new characters, being Ryo Suzuki and Robert Garcia. Ryo is a half Japanese, half American martial artist who was born in Southtown. Ryo is a son of a great martial artist, Takuma Sasaki. Ryo's father deemed Ryo to be his successor and trained him at a young age to become a great fighter and to one day run his dojo. But Ryo did not take the training right away, due to him being kind-hearted and bashful. It wasn't until Robert joined the family dojo, and this is when Ryu started to enjoy fighting. But this happiness wouldn't last, because on Ryu's 10th birthday, his mother died in a car crash. This caused Ryu to become the caretaker of his younger sister, Yuri. To support Yuri, Ryu would pick up odd jobs around the city, like in construction and restaurant work, while also running the family's dojo. And in Ryu's teenage years, he decided to take up street fighting to make extra money. but he was pretty crap at it. But after years of persistence and learning, he remembered the teachings of his father, such as a man's strength cannot be known only by his fists, and real strength must be felt through the heart and mind. Once Ryo took this into practice, he became a much greater fighter and was well known around Southtown. Our second protagonist is Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia is the son of wealthy businessman Alberto Garcia and best friends of Takami Suzuki. Robert had a pretty easy childhood as he was spoiled and waited on by hand and foot by his parents. But Robert always felt there was something missing in his life, so he would sneak out at night to watch his father and Ryu's dad train in Ryu's dojo, which inspired Robert to become a great fighter. But Robert's dad wanted Robert to focus on his corporate teachings and one day inherit the Garcia Foundation. But Robert rebelled and ran away to Ryu's dad's dojo and demanded that Takama teaches him to fight. Takama was impressed by Robert's spirit and agreed to teach him. Unlike Ryu, Robert was a natural when it came to fighting and took to it really quickly, which led Takama to be more stricter and harsh on his son Ryu. But after Ryu's mother's death, Takama disappeared. Robert was forced to go to Italy, but he promised his friend Ryu that he would return one day. Robert continued with his training in Italy and became a well-known fighter overseas. Now let's move on to the plot. Southtown, 1978, 12 years before the events of Fatal Fury, we are introduced to Ryo, the son and disciple of legendary karate master Takami Suzuki, the creator of his own karate style, the Kigo-jin karate, probably butchered that, which is known as the extreme style. Ryo is currently running his father's struggling dojo, and one day, after returning from a street fight, Ryo comes home to find the dojo is trashed and his sister Yuri has been kidnapped, because he refused to work for a guy known as Mr. Big, who is a sub-boss of this game. So Ryo calls his longtime friend and rival, Robert Garcia, who Robert is rather close to Ryu's sister, Yuri. So after coming up with a plan, our two heroes decide to jump on their motorcycles and fast cars and fight their way through the city to find clues on who kidnapped Yuri. On their way, they come across many evildoers, and some people ain't really evildoers, they're just there and get caught up in a crossfire. One of the first people our heroes encounter on their vengeance tour is Ryohaku Duda. That's probably butchered that. Ryohaku is a master and the main teacher of his own martial arts style called Tudryu Azuken. I've probably butchered that as well. And this dojo is a rival to Ryu's dojo. So Ryu thought this was like payback for their rivalry. So Ryu goes into the place like just angry, starts to fight with the dude, and the guy's like, "No, I didn't take your sister. Why'd I do that?" So they're like, "Okay, cool. You're not the one." Ryohaku enjoys random things like karaoke and washing clothes. So once you defeated Ryohaku, you decide, okay, it's alright, let's go to this shady bar where lots of weird things happen in our town. So that's where you go and you meet the guy known as Jack Turner. Jack is a big belly man who is a member of the evil syndicate that is running Southtown. So basically, he's just a henchman. His fighting style is made up of a mixture of boxing, kickboxing and wrestling. Hence one of his moves in the game is actually a drop kick, which is pretty jokes. Jack is known to be a bit of a brash dude who likes to beat up anyone who crosses his path. Jack can also infuse his attacks with energy. Jack also loves leather gloves and his biker friends. He also looks a bit like a middle-aged rocker who won't let go of the past, and he's sort of like a bum. But after you beat the crap out of Jack, he tells you that he thinks he saw the person who took Yuri go to Chinatown. So once again, after you do this, you jump into your sick-ass motorcycle or your car if you're Robert and head over to Chinatown, where you run into Li Pei Long. Li is a master of old Chinese medicine and a Chinese martial arts, which she's been dubbed the gentle yet destructive by people in the fight community. After the passing of his adoptive father and mentor, he was instructed to finish his studies in Southtown, but he then became infatuated with a local Kempo style and decided to become a street fighter. He also became the director of the Southtown prison and ran a small herbal shop part-time in Chinatown, which leads our fighters there. After the fight, Lee informs Ryo and Andy that they should seek the bouncer at the La Arma restaurant for more information on Yuri's kidnapping. So once again, we jump on our motorcycles and our Ferraris and race over to La Arma to question the bouncer known as King. Is a well-known kickboxing legend in Southtown after defeating a famous Muay Thai champion. Originally from France, but moved to Southtown for unknown reasons at this point in the game. But 5 years ago, King suffered a humiliating defeat to Jack Turner and his gang. It is unknown how she lost, but she ends up working for the gangster known as Mr. Biggs as his bouncer of La Arma restaurant. The actress Grace Jones was an inspiration in King's creations. After a brief conversation with King, it leads into an epic fight. If you win the fight with a special attack, King's top will rip open, revealing that it's actually a woman. And for all these years, everyone thought King was a man, so it's a big revelation. And the fact that no one knows is hilarious, because she has female features, but whatever. So after the fight with King, she agrees to help you find Yuri and guides you to Mr. Big's hideout. But outside Mr. Big's hideout, you encounter a boxer named Mickey Rogers. Mickey Rogers once was a professional boxer, but was banned from boxing after accidentally killing an opponent during a match. Since then, he has been lurking around Southtown looking for people to fight to vent his anger, but he's still an honorary man. He is the guy that King tells you to meet, but he only agrees to help you if you could beat him in a fight. Once you beat him, he helps you gain access to the military base to fight another one of Mr. Big's henchmen, the guy ripoff known as John Crawley. John Crawley was a captain in the Navy and a martial art instructor, and also known as the Mad Dog and the Killing Machine. That's not scary. But during the mission, John was shot in the back and was saved by Mr. Big. After recovering from his injuries, John retired from the Navy and joined Mr. Big's syndicate. John is very confident in his fighting style and has no problems with killing people. John has several energy-based attacks, which he fires from his hands. Pretty sure one of them is a sonic boom. The animation looks exactly like it, but hey, who am I to say? You fight John inside an aircraft character named the Guardian. After beating John, he tells you where to find Mr. Big's factory. This is where you go to fight the big bad, Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs, aka James. Well, we don't actually know if James is his real name, but he told John Crawley to call him James because he's the guy that saved him. I forgot to say that. So sorry about that. But this is a lie. Well, actually, we don't even know if it's a lie. We're just guessing. Because SNK has never actually confirmed this, so Biggs could be lying, he could not be. I don't know. Anyways, Mr. Biggs is the former crime lord of Southtown and the right-hand man of the true crime leader of Southtown, which will be revealed later, as it's a spoiler for future games, so I don't want to spoil it for you lot, you know, because everything's spoiled nowadays. If you're going to need it, you probably find it, but I don't want to do that. But anyway, but without spoiling much, he kidnapped Yuri to help his plans with regaining Southtown by getting Rio to join his forces. Mr. Biggs fights with nightsticks and can release electric waves as a projectile attack from his nightsticks. He also can do some weird spinny move, like, it's weird, I can't really explain it, but it's kind of like Giles' move, not Giles, sorry, kind of like Blanca's move, but it's weird. He's not on the spam level as, like, that guy from the last game who I hate saying his name, Billy G.D. Kane from Fatal Fury, who's the most annoying guy ever. But anyway, we're going to move on from that because I'm getting angry. But still annoying anyway. But he's not as hard either, so that's great. But once you beat him, you are attacked by a masked man named Mr. Crawley. Not much is known about Mr. Crawley at this point, exactly, but he's the most broken spam character in any game. He's on the same level as that guy who I recently referred to. I'm not going to say his name. Like, he can cancel out a move and do another move, and like the rage in me built up so much I was going to smash my controller, but I've decided not to. So yeah, but strangely, when you're fighting him, you notice that he's got a lot of the same moves as you do. So you're like, this is weird. Who could this masked man be? But before we move on, brief disclosure, I haven't actually clocked this game as of recording this because I got so filled up with rage, I legit was going to smash my Nintendo Switch, but I rallied against it and didn't do it. So yeah, so you beat this guy, Mr. Crawley, and you free your sister, and just as you're about to do the final blow, depending on the version of the game you got, you're about to do it, and she goes, no wait, he's our, and it goes, to be continued. So I could spoil it here, but I'm not, because it's actually revealed in the next game, Art Fighting 2, which I'll be covering soon. So it's a less of a dark ending, unlike, you know, Fatal Fury where you kill geese. This one's less angry, not angry, but you know, like dark. So yes, great game. Now we're going to move on to the gameplay. Now let's talk about the features. Gameplay. Fatal Fury has a 4-button layout. You have a button that represents punch, a button that represents kick, and a button that represents grab and doubles up as a heavy punch. And you also have a taunt button. You can move your character with the thumbstick or D-pad. Depends what you like. I prefer the thumbstick. Sometimes it's more responsive. But if you want to do like the specific moves, you need to use a D-pad. But the D-pad on the Switch is not desirable, I would say. Like most fighting games, you have a life bar on the top of the screen. And underneath that life bar is a Kai bar. The Kai bar depletes each time you use a special attack, such as fireballs, or any special move that your character has. Or when your opponent taunts you. To recharge your ki, you need to hold down on a action button, whether it's punch, kick, and your character will enter a Dragon Ball Z-like stance and it will start charging. It looks pretty cool, not gonna lie. Like Fatal Fury and Street Fighter, each character has their own unique moves. For example, Ryu has a move kind of like the Hadouken, and King has these kicks where she shoots out projectiles from her feet, which is pretty cool. To perform these moves, you need to input a unique sequence of directions followed by a punch or kick button. By doing these special moves, it depletes your key bar, and if you charge your key bar up enough, you can perform killer moves, which is just a amplified version of one of your special attacks. For example, Ryu would do a huge fireball, but they're not killer moves like in like Mortal Kombat's fatalities. They're just, like I said, specialized versions of the moves done before. Just like Fatal Fury, you have to be quite precise when you're putting in the sequence to perform special moves, or they will not do it. It's, unlike I said before with Street Fighter, you can kind of like half do the sequence and it'll work, but with Fatal Fury, you literally have to input each direction properly so you can perform the move. Now we're going to talk about the graphics and the music in the game. Just like most fighting games of the era, Art of Fighting is a 2D fighter which uses 16-bit highly detailed animated sprites. I'm playing the original port of the arcade version, so this is the best version out there. The sprites are very detailed for the time, obviously. Like if you was to play the SNES or the Mega Drive version, SMK had to lower the graphics, so the sprites didn't look as good. The background stages are pretty nice. They stick out. They're pretty detailed. Like one of them you fight in a bar and you see the people in the background cheering. And one of them's in a French restaurant when you fight King and there's people playing instruments in the background. And it looks pretty cool. I really enjoy it. Another cool feature that Art of Fighting has is the dynamic camera. Like in most fighting games, the camera's quite zoomed out, so you see the full sort of stage. But with this game, the camera's quite locked in to the characters. Unless you move far apart, then the camera kind of widens out. But then when you get close again, it zooms in, and it makes the game feel more intense because it's more close combat rather than fighting from side to side. But it's really cool. I enjoy it. Like I said, makes you feel really intense, and that was another key selling point for that game at the time because all the other games had the fixed camera. Now it's time for a new section I'm going to do, which I didn't do in the last video. I'm going to talk about reviews from the time of the game's original release. While looking on the internet to see about how other people thought about the game, lots of people criticized the Mega Drive version because the Mega Drive was not as powerful, obviously, as the arcade version or the Neo Geo actual version. So they had to downgrade the graphics a lot. And also, because of the original Mega Drive controller only had 3 buttons, it kind of made the game unplayable unless you had the special 6-button Mega Drive controller. Because without the 4th button, obviously, you can't do the taunt, so that's a bit of a no-no for people. Also, a lot of people criticize the cheesy story, but obviously with age you come to appreciate simple stories like that without the many twists and turns and stuff that you get with like modern day games, which kind of throw people out of it now because, you know, everyone just wants sort of something straightforward and simple. But yeah, and also same with the SNES. The SNES, they had to dump down the graphics as well, but they had the 4 buttons controller plus the 2 shoulder pads, so they were fine. So they got decent reviews, but the overall best version, if you weren't playing the arcade version, was the Neo Geo version. Yeah. my overall thoughts. So, unlike Fatal Fury, I had no idea what art fighting was when I was younger. I never played it, so I don't have that rose-tinted view on the game. So I went in with no expectations. And plus, this game, that even came out in the arcades in England, if I'm honest. Yeah. So, the only thing I could say I didn't like about this game was the controller was a bit clunky. But again, that could be because I'm playing on the Switch on handheld mode most of the time. So it's a bit weird for spacing and stuff. So maybe if I played on on the Xbox or the PS4, I probably had a better time controlling it. Also, the gaming difficulty is rather steep. Like Fatal Fury, it's the first couple of characters are fine, you can get past, but then the learning curve just ramps up and you're getting destroyed over and over again by King. But then it also makes no sense because King's a lot harder than the sub-boss Mr. Biggs, which is weird because it took me 2 goes to beat Mr. Biggs and it took me 8 tries to beat King, which is super confusing to me because ain't it normally the sub-boss is harder than a average character, but I don't know. Maybe it's my playstyle, I'm not really sure. And I was even playing on the easiest difficulty at one point because it's got too annoying, especially when you're fighting not Captain Crawley, Mr. Crawley is just ridiculous. It's impossible to beat because back in the day when these arcade games were made, they would sort of cheat with the programming when it came to bosses. So they would read your input and counter your stuff, so you keep on putting coins in the machine so they will keep making money. And obviously for these ports and stuff, they didn't take that out of it. So it just gets repetitively annoying and you feel like destroying your house, your game console, anything that's in your view. But besides that, the game is really good. I really liked it. I like the simple revenge storyline. I like the character designs. They all look pretty cool. They're not major rip-offs of other characters. You got a few, obviously, obviously Ryu, who is obviously a clone of Ryu and Ken, and obviously every game's Mike Tyson sort of rip-off, but at least in this game he's not as obvious as in the rip-off is in Street Fighter and King of Fighters. This guy doesn't look anything like Mike Tyson, he's just a boxer, so you can kind of get around that. And then the other sort of characters who got who are inspired by other characters or homages, they don't look that obvious. I didn't know about the Grace Kelly thing for King until I actually researched into it. I was like, oh, okay, cool, that's pretty neat. And the Gar ripoff, obviously, he's the most blatant one in this game as well. John Crawley, he's so obviously meant to be Guy. Solid game. I like the music in this game. Each stage has its own unique song to it and feel. But like Fatal Fury, it doesn't have any memorable songs. On the top of my head, I can think of any Street Fighter song or Mortal Kombat song. And with this game, I played this game for hours but I can't remember any of the stage songs. So maybe that's a problem there. It's not as iconic, I guess. And it's funny how SNK was going to try and get Ryu to be their mascot, even though he's a blatant ripoff of Ryu. We're not going to go into the backstory of why Capcom took shots at this and found it hilarious in one of their games. I'll probably touch on this in a later subject. But besides that, I'm glad they went with Terry Bogard as their mascot because, he doesn't look like a Capcom character, so you can get away with that. But I really cannot wait to play Art of Fighting 2 and see the gameplay improvements they've made on that one. So my ending thoughts is I would highly recommend this game to anyone who's interested in fast-paced fighting games with a really fun story. It's a solid old school fighter, cool cast of characters. You can find this game on the Xbox store for £6 and 9p, on the PSN store for £5.97, and on the Nintendo eShop for £6.29. But I'd say if you was to get any of these versions, if you own a PS4, PS5 at this point, Xbox Series X, I would say get on one of them for the controllers layout. It's a lot easier. But if you're on the go and you just want to play it when you have a spare minute and you got a Switch, get on the Switch. Might find it a bit difficult to play, but you might be better than me, so you might pick up on it a lot better. And at such a low price, you can't really go wrong, can you? And you don't want to be a fool and miss out on this classic gem of a game. Also, screw Mr. Crawley, and he can go to hell. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. Hopefully, next video will be Fatal Fury 2. And then after that, it will be Art of Fighting 2. If there's any games you would like me to review, hopefully older games that I can pick up on like the PSN network or the Xbox Live Store or on the Nintendo eShop, suggest them to me and I'll try and get them and I'll put them out and review them. But I'd like to thank you all again. Another big shout out to my friend Sam, who's inspired me to do this. I'm going to try and get these videos out on a more regular basis. And hopefully you can share with a friend, let them know. I have my social media links in the bottom, coming up on the screen now hopefully. Also, you can catch my podcast with my friend, which we release 2 episodes a week on Monday and Tuesdays, and it's called Trip Around the Multiverse, where we talk about a number of subjects from video games, wrestling, comic books, life experiences, you name it. Hopefully we'll talk about it. You can find us on all podcasting apps. At the moment, we're not on Apple Podcasts, but I'm trying to get there. But yes, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around the corner.